In this video, we'll take a look at how to draw a realistic eye using colored pencils. We'll start by lightly drawing or transferring the image using graphite onto Bristol vellum paper. Then I'm going to start in the area of the pupil, making it dark. I'll start with indigo blue. We're not going to use black at all for this demonstration. Instead, we're going to layer indigo blue and dark umber. These two colors, when mixed, will create a more natural looking black. So once we have the indigo blue on the surface, we'll go back over the top of it with dark umber. Then we can start to develop the colors that are found in the iris. I'll layer a color called True Blue. Now I'm using Prismacolor Premier pencils for this demonstration, but if you don't have that exact blue, a similar blue will do as well. Then over the top of that, I'm going to start to develop some of the more neutral tones by layering putty beige and then a lighter blue on top of that. As each layer is added, the colors will become more waxy and easily moved on the surface. We can start to develop some of the darker areas by again using indigo blue. The darker areas in the iris of the eye will exist mainly around the edges of the eye and closer to the pupil. These patterns that are produced seem to radiate from the pupil, so when you're creating your lines, try to make these lines as directional as possible, exuding out from the center portion of the pupil. Then we can burnish these applications using white. We'll also add a bit of depth to the color by using a little bit of a raw sienna. We can make the values around the edges of the pupil and inside of the pupil darker, again by layering dark umber over the top of our indigo blue applications. We'll create a bit of shadow that will result from the upper eyelid where it overlaps the pupil, so it will be a bit darker at the top portion of the iris. Many of the colors you'll find in a colored pencil set are a bit unnatural when applied to the surface alone. In order to alleviate this, we'll layer neutral tones on top of it, which will desaturate the color a bit. As applications are applied to the surface, periodically we'll use a colorless blender to work them together. A colorless blender is basically the waxy material found in a colored pencil, without any pigment, that allows us to move the color on the surface, creating nice transitions between colors and values. We'll continue to layer colors on the surface, progressively getting heavier with our applications. In this case, we're applying indigo blue followed by dark umber to create some of the darker values that are found throughout the iris. The patterns created within the iris result from the contrast between the lighter values and the darker values. We can continue to push that contrast to create more interesting patterns within the iris. So after some of the darker areas have been applied, we'll go back with white and push the contrast further. Then we'll continue to work the shadowed area that exists at the top portion of the iris. Again, this is accomplished by layering dark umber and indigo blue. We'll create a bit of an indication of highlight in the middle portion of the pupil, so it doesn't look quite so flat. It's also important to note that we've preserved an area of highlight on the top portion of the pupil. Highlights within the iris and pupil of the eye will make the eye appear wet when it's finished. Then, using a white pencil, we'll start to establish some of the so-called white areas of the eye. Then we'll layer over the top of that with an application of cream, and then again a layer of white. These colors are applied heavily, creating a buttery surface in which additional layers will easily blend. We'll continue to layer additional colors, in this case a bit of light peach. The so-called white portions of the eyes are never white. Although they might be a lighter value in many circumstances, they are often made up of complex mixtures of colors. In this case, we'll create a little bit of the shadow that exists underneath the eyelid and around the edges of the white parts of the eye using an application of dark umber. Then we'll go back over the top of it using light peach and burnish that color into the surface a bit. We'll also burnish the color using white. We're going to progressively build up the shadows in these areas. This means a series of applications will occur where we will apply darker values and then apply lighter values, burnishing the color into the surface, and then progressively get darker with our applications. Now a bit of indigo blue is added in the shadowed areas, followed by an application of dark umber. To smooth out the texture and create nice transitions, we'll use a colorless blender to work it into the surface. We'll also add a bit of warmth to this color by adding a bit of peach. Then we'll continue to slowly build up the darker values, burnishing each application with a colorless blender. We'll also use peach to add a bit of warmth on the left side of the eye as well. Here again, on this side of the eye, we'll continue to build up the darker values using a layered application of dark umber followed by indigo blue, and then burnished with a colorless blender. We'll also use the colorless blender to smooth out the edges around the iris. In most cases, that edge is not a hard line, instead it almost blurs into the white areas around it. We can also revisit the iris and create more intricate details using indigo blue, dark umber, and white. How far you take the detail in the iris portion of the eye is entirely up to you. Now we can address the tear duct in the corner of the eye. We'll start with a heavy application of light peach. This is followed by a light application of crimson red. The color may appear strong on the surface at first, but once it is burnished with white, it becomes muted. We'll create a slight indication of shadow using the dark umber before moving on to the skin tone around the eye. We'll start with a light application of light peach. We'll go ahead and apply this color entirely around the eye. Then we'll start to define the top eyelid using peach followed by, again, crimson red. We'll darken the value a bit with an application of dark umber. And then we'll burnish these colors using the colorless blender. We'll use a bit of cream at the bottom portion of the eyelid, and we'll redefine the edge of the iris using dark umber and indigo blue. We can also lighten the underneath side of the top eyelid using white. Then we'll move on and start developing the skin tone around the eye. Here again, we'll get progressively heavier with our applications. Once we have a nice buttery surface established on the upper eyelid, we'll start to add a bit of the color mulberry. Again, this is basically a red purple, and if you don't have this color, you can substitute something that is similar. Then we'll burnish that color in using white and light peach. We'll add a bit of the mulberry color on the right side of the eye as well. It may seem a bit odd to use red purple around the eye, but I have found that most lighter skin complexions do have areas of purple in them. We'll continue to burnish the applications using light peach, and then we can go back and start to push the darker values, here with a bit of dark umber. We'll revisit the tear duct, this time with the color peach, with a heavier application. We can ease the transitions from darker values to lighter values, this time with a bit of dark umber, and then we can burnish that application using the light peach. Now we'll start to develop some of the darker values that exist on the upper eyelid. First, we'll apply a light application of burnt ochre. We'll apply this color on both sides of the eyelid, keeping the lighter values in the center. And then we'll burnish that application using a colorless blender. We can pull this color all the way up to the edge of the eyebrow above the eye. And we'll add a bit of it just underneath the eye to create a bit of contrast between the lower flap and the values that exist underneath it. We can darken up the crease using a bit of dark umber, and we'll apply this color very lightly underneath the eye as well. Then these applications are burnished using light peach. A bit of the color cream is added as well. Again, heavy pressure is applied in this application. Next, we'll apply a heavy application of peach. This is used just to add a bit more variety in the value and create more contrast. To smooth out the texture and ease transitions of value and color, we'll burnish the entire area using white. This is followed by a light application of burnt ochre, again pushing the value and increasing the contrast. Then we'll burnish this area using a colorless blender. Now using the dark umber, we'll strengthen some of the shadowed areas around the eye. We'll also do the same in the area of the crease that exists on the upper eyelid. Transitions are again burnished using a colorless blender. We'll add some very subtle wrinkles, again with a light touch with dark umber. Now we're ready to address the eyebrow. Basically, we're just going to pull lines outward and upward just as the hair grows, starting with dark umber. These lines should be deliberate and heavily applied, and should taper at the end of the stroke. We won't cover the area completely, instead we'll allow some of the skin to show through. Then, to darken the underside of the eyebrow, we'll go back with indigo blue. Initially, this application will appear, well, blue, but we'll go back over the top of it with dark umber, darkening the value and making it appear more natural. Now we're ready for the eyelashes. And for the eyelashes, we're going to pull the line downward and outward. And in most circumstances, eyelashes are a bit longer than you think they should be. We're creating these initial applications, again with dark umber. These strokes should be fairly deliberate with heavy pressure. We will vary the amount of pressure, creating a bit of depth in the hairs themselves. As we get progressively closer to the center of the eye, we'll start to make the eyelashes more vertical in nature. Remember, hair grows organically, so it's okay to allow some of your lines to go against the grain or go in a slightly different direction. This will just make the eyelashes appear more natural. Try not to be too stiff with your application as well. Since the eyelashes are typically added last in a drawing like this process can be nerve-wracking. But just relax and have fun. Allow the eyelashes to just manifest themselves on the surface. For the bottom eyelashes, we'll do basically the same, except they'll be smaller and there'll be less of them. Again, instead of pulling them outward and upward, we'll be pulling them outward and downward. And just as we did on the top portion of the eye, as we get closer to the center, those lines will become more vertical. It's also important to note that there's just a bit of skin that's visible before the bottom eyelashes start. A lot of beginning artists forget this and put the eyelashes too close to the white parts of the eye. We can go back now and darken up the eyelashes, again with an application of indigo blue. Again, the reason for this is to darken up the value without using black, which will make the drawing appear unnatural. So once this initial application of indigo blue is applied, we'll go back with dark umber, darkening the value and making the so-called black feel more natural. We'll do the same on the bottom eyelashes with the indigo blue as well, mainly darkening the areas where it touches the skin. Then we're ready to go back with the dark umber, making the value darker and appear more natural. And lastly, we'll go back with the dark umber and create a few stray hairs, just a couple, to make it appear more natural. And now our colored pencil drawing of an eye is complete. I hope you found this video helpful, and I hope it helps you in your own artistic journey. If you enjoyed this video and you're ready to learn more, why not check out 5 video courses, weekly live instruction, and over 6,280 minutes of art instruction, which includes video courses, downloadable ebooks, weekly live lessons streamed across the internet, and lesson plans for teachers. Just click on the Learn More Now button to start learning today.